So it's an improvement process around continuous improvement within your organisations as well. And this code is a very good guide and a good tool, which Ted is very sound in. Independent audit process for you all. So a bit of an agenda on what we'll run through today. So Ted will take it from here in a moment, but he'll run you through what the code is all about, the journey to get to where we've got to at the moment, the key components, the contents, and some timeframes for the implementation of it all. And then we'll have a quick 5-minute break, grab a coffee, any questions you've got, you can turn your mics off and ask, of course. And then session 2 will be the code in detail. So Ted will run through each element. We'll give you an overview of the site assessment checklist and what the key assessment outcomes will be. And then we'll have another open discussion at the end. Okay, so over to you, Ted.
Thank you, Melissa. Welcome, everybody, and hopefully you can hear me clearly. You can see there the framework standard for developing and implementing that. You're going to get death by PowerPoint, but unfortunately that's the only way we can do it effectively at this stage. And you can see it's a SEQ management system operating under the Australian, predominantly for the Australian construction industry. You can see that it's JASAN's approved. I don't want to go through all of that stuff on there, but just to say it is a standard. If ever anybody asks you, what are you certified to? Well, just tell them to go onto the JASAN's database and look at the standards, certification standards. If they go to the CCF Code standard, it'll be there under JASAN. So it's an approved system. It's proven best practice, and it is targeted predominantly for civil construction, although you can modify that for other use. So if you look at the next slide, it's been around for about 20 years. I can recall being involved in this right at the beginning sometime, in fact, it's more than 20 years. It's about 1996, 97 we started the process, and a lot of the companies listening today can remember that process. And it was pretty simple in those days. Issue 9 is the one you're currently under, and it definitely needed updating. Like most standards, they have their life and then they need to come up to the current standard. So that's what's happened with this standard, the version 10 or issue 10. As it says there, significant change in the construction industry methodology and ISO standards. We've now gone out of prescriptive processes. We're more going into what we call no procedures, but more of process control and risk management. You can see you can build something new and innovative that it reflects the needs of stakeholders. Stakeholders keep changing what their needs are, so we need to be conscious of that and try and maintain and keep up to date with their requirements too. So broad consultation, that's what happened with the stakeholders, the key stakeholders, just to make sure that we're on the right path. So what we've got here in issue 10 code is what the client and the stakeholders and yourselves required through this consultation process. Next slide, there we go. You can see the 3 elements. You've got the Civil Construction Management Code, which is the booklet that organisations like ourselves audit you guys to as a CBs. There's a scheme requirement for all CB bodies. So there's, as you can see, requirement for bodies providing audits, which is like our company and other companies, to certify you to the CCF. So that's pretty well set rules. So we can't muck around with those rules. And then you've got this additional component now, which you can see on your far right, which is required to be done on every project. In other words, we've got to take a couple of mug shots of your project, you know, something that'll demonstrate what you're doing, probably a key element of the project. And then you can see there's 9 elements that we have to look at in detail. This is just a summary sheet, and at the end, we'll look at the checklist and go through those various components. So it's a lot more site controlled, if you can say. There's a lot more requirements for you guys to prove that you're actually doing what you're saying, your documentation is saying. A lot more emphasis is on that side. when you look at the code, it's still got 14 elements, but it's simplified in the way it operates. You can see there, forget about, the scope. It just talks about references, definitions. And then you start at 4, which is really where the code, if you can go back, Melissa, you're a bit quick there. You can see the sort of structure. It goes company structure and systems. In the various headings, you've got that, operations, business support that you need to have to be able to do those 2 functions. And then there's a number of appendices down the bottom, which we'll try and cover as best we can near the end. So that's the main elements. And if you count the 14, which starts, there's 5 under section 4, and there's 6 there. And if you add the 3 under section 6, you've got the 14 base elements in that sort of format. And then the appendices to underpin that. Thank you. Just as an example, you can see the sort of way they're heading. For example, clause 4.3 talks about leadership. A very important and key function of this code is leadership. Without leadership, you can't have anything. So you can see here, the leaders within the organisation must demonstrate their commitment, be proactive, awareness and involvement in the continual development, implementation and improvement of the IMS, or the MS, sorry, the management system. In other words, it says it starts from the top. If there's no commitment up the top, then the thing's going to fall apart. And we're now got to measure that commitment by senior management. And when we're talking about, it's the senior management of the organisation. There's some examples of evidence that you can provide. The leader's got to be aware of the management system principles. They've got to be actively involved in periodic reviews and achievements of the system, make sure that it's actually achieving the end product. Leaders are ensuring appropriate resources exist for achievement of the MS outcome. It's no good having a system and then saying, oh, but I haven't got anybody to run it or manage it. You've got to be able to demonstrate that your commitments are there and you've actually provided the resources to be able to fulfil those commitments as it applies to your business. And then leaders demonstrating their active involvement and support of the MS. You've got to support it because your guys will, down the line, will feel that it's only sort of a word of mouth. It doesn't really matter. But if you drive it and you show your commitment, then you're going to get the same sort of outcome from people below you. So that's just a typical element, just an example of that. There is at the back, you'll see at the back of that sort of what they call code, CCF code versus the various standards as a cross-reference for your own information. I won't go into too much detail, just to say that the first column there, management system and its processes, is the new code. This is it. So under clause 4.1, that clause, where would you find it from the previous code? Version 9, you would have found it under clause 1.1 and 8.3. Those two talk about management systems and its processes. And then the ISO standards, this is where you would find them in the ISO codes, the respective codes. So it's a bit of a checklist. For instance, business scope. You notice in the previous one, we didn't talk about that. It is now a requirement. In the standard, ISO standards, it's under clause 4.3 in all those 3 elements. And the same thing with leadership. We did actually cover leadership apart from, apparently there's no leadership in safety, but there is not a requirement in that side under the code in the AS 4801. But however, it does show it under 45,001. So that one's a bit outdated, that 4801 setup. So you can see that table gives you where the elements are currently, where if they apply, where you would find them in the CCF in your current system, and then where they are in the ISO system if you're looking at that component. So the next, some of the code scheme rules. This is, again, JAS ends controlled, and you can see that the certification, it goes in 2 stages. Your initial certification, if you're a new company, you go into stage 1, which is what we call an organisation documentation, to make sure that you meet all the standard requirements in general. And then you do the certification audit to show that you're actually applying all that through your system and it's working. So that's the certification process. It's one initial, and then you do an annual audit. As you can see, annual audit will be reviewed on all code elements. It's different to the ISO, where you only do certain elements over a 3-year period. This one says every 12 months you will go through the basic elements, because they don't address as many elements as the ISO do. The scope, very important. You can see there, reviewing the scope now becomes very important on each assessment. That's why it's important when you submit your renewals to CCF Victoria that you actually put down what your scope is. So if there's any adjustments, then it can be made during the audit process, because that may have an impact on your timing and all that sort of stuff. Plus the number of people. You can see their duration and time. It's all dependent. There's a set table that Jazz say to us, depending on your size, how many sites we have to visit, and all that sort of stuff. I think one of the companies that are here today know that because of their size, I have to do 3 sites as a minimum during the audit process. So it depends on your size, on how many sites we'll need to do that. And all those checklists for each one of those have to be filled out. Thanks, Melissa. As you can see there, required site visit at each audit. Yeah, that's really your key. And you can see how it's structured. There are the 2 photographs that we'll take as 2 they suggest. I don't see any need for any more. It gives an overview and perhaps a critical element of the job. And then you can see the summary. The 9 elements there are just a summary. So whether they comply or not, or there's an observation made. And then there's a checklist that we have to follow through, which we'll talk about at the end of the setup. So you can see the 9 key elements we talked about. It's important that you get a grip of that. You're probably doing it in some form or other. We probably need you now to just formalise it a little bit better so it's much easier to follow. And you can see there links to other CCF processes and documentations, which is what you define in your scope of works. And as it says, it can be amended at any time. In fact, you can amend that halfway through your organisation. If all of a sudden you've decided to add something to it, you need to talk to your auditing organisation to see how you can manage that through your process. Thanks. Well, there's that wonderful change in key concepts. The old story of plan, do, check and act. I don't want to say too much, but that the plan is the important part, because from there you'll be able to implement the system. The key element is to monitor what you do. You don't just say, because I've planned it, I've performed it, I don't need to do those bottom 2. Those bottom 2 are so critical. Monitor and improve. Everything is subject to improvement, as much as we like to think we've got it all under control. So you can see there, it's an integrated system. It's moved to risk-based. Everything now is predicated on you measuring the risk to your business, whatever you do, and how you're going to manage that risk. So it's a total business management system approach. Yeah, so you can see it increases focus on operational delivery aspects. That's how you deliver your service. I mean, that's your end product to your client. And each audit will include a mandatory site implementation assessment. Apart from the usual head office type functions that we look at, the main elements, which is those elements, that mandatory site will actually cross over onto those. Sort of talks in construction industry language. I don't know about no ISO speak, but it's a lot simpler than the ISO, I must admit. And it's trying to incorporate best practice aspects, all that sort of stuff. And the new code, the advantages, it's, as we said before, for the Australian construction industry. It reflects the best practices that are currently in place. And it's really, main focus is to key service delivery and operational aspects. I mean, that's the key area for you to deliver a product to a client to the standard that's required, that you said you will do it. Do you notice the next one? Seamlessly integrate safety, environmental and quality. In other words, that BAU, I finally worked out what it means. Business as usual. So there's nothing changed in that time. It's integrating all those 3 elements. Requires annual audits of all aspects and their site implementation. New code scheme rules for auditing. Yeah, it's a bit tighter, and I reckon it's a bit better. It's structured so that you understand exactly at each element what's required, so that there's no hidden hidden stuff that can come up and bite you. Clear on expected outcomes, what you're expected to produce, and focus on meeting key stakeholders' needs. I mean, the important part is without clients, we don't have a business, and we need to be conscious of what their requirements are. So it focuses on meeting key stakeholders' needs, and it's plain speak, easy to understand. I think the code is reasonably easy to understand. I like the way I've done it because it's also gives you a little explanation of how to achieve them. Core business operation, yeah, you can see the procurer of services. I mean, you can see the stakeholders, where they fit into there. They're targeted around core business outcomes, specifically in our industry, meeting specific requirements. I mean, that's the key. The client wants to know that you're going to meet that. It's total risk base, seamlessly integrate. Oh, sorry, we've talked about that. Checks alignance. Well, the stakeholders got the same thing. You need check compliance each year, includes a site, so you can actually demonstrate that not only are you complying, you're being regularly checked by a third party. Much easier to understand and interpret, and increases focus on service delivery assurance. The client has some assurance, not fully, but some assurance that you've got a management system that will deliver the required outcome. That's what they want to know. Not, oh, you look, leave it with me, it's up here. Now, for contractors, what you had previously, it's very similar. It's about 80% of the current system, you know, you've got there. Easy to understood. Again, greater focus on operational aspects. It is geared for how you do your service on site for the client, how you provide your service. There are certain areas that you do, say, in your office, but predominantly most of it you're doing it out on site. And again, greater focus on operational aspects. What you do best, less focus on things you said were less important to you. I mean, although we talk about policies, you notice they don't talk about a policy. However, you have to be conscious that in some aspects you have to have a policy. For instance, safety policy, that's a requirement under the regs. But it's more looking at you having objectives, which to me encompasses a policy and a process of how you achieve those. And you can see there is a more rationalisation in that area. It's much easier to interpret. Yeah, it tells us what you want. We're, you know, and that sort of stuff. So we have given some examples on that area. Thanks. From CABS, which is the certification body, it's much, not much has changed. We've still got rules that we've got to comply with, and you look at this, it looks at increased in consistency assessment. Yeah, level playing field. So that now says this must be done. So let's all comply on that side. Ensure greater level of audit competency. Yes, there's further training required. You have to demonstrate your competencies in the construction industry. Mandates operational sites delivery focus. That site check is so important now. Increased assurance of audit experience in industry involved. He's got to say he's got relevant current industry involvements, and he understands the system. And you can't have somebody that's come out of auditing, say, a nursing home straight into that. It just won't happen. Revised scheme provides a simpler set of requirements for audits. It does, but it does put a lot more reporting onus on us too. And the code provides more comprehensive set of assessment tools, more consistent and clear outcomes and reports. Yeah, I think it's done that. It's not too bad on that side. Thank you. Timelines. Unfortunately, we're running a bit behind time here because this was available the 1st of February 2019. I can remember going across there for a briefing, and all of the cabs said to CCF Victoria, it's great, you brought this out, but we need to have time to be able to put the scheme together. So it's taken us a lot longer, because we need JAS's approval. As you can see, estimate CB is ready to certify the new code subject to JAS's approval. So we've been approved to do it. I'm not sure about the others, and it has delayed us. But unfortunately, the previous code sunset is the 28th of February 2021, which doesn't give some companies very much time. And in fact, I would suggest most companies from June onwards that need to be certified sort of get certified to the new standard, because if there is some gaps, you can work out with your auditor how to address those issues. So don't get caught out. I've spoken to a number of some of my clients and I've said, look, unfortunately, because you're not quite ready, we'll just have to do it instead of in 12 months' time, it'll have to be done in 8 or 9 or 10 months' time. So just check on that. Don't be frightened of the Code 10. You should be able to, with a minor adjustments, be able to come up to the Code version 10. And again, continual feedback, because the code is not set in stone. It's always subject to reviews. ISO standards are subject to review. Some are more regular than others. So yeah, don't just say, oh, that's it. Can't do anything about it. Next one on this. That's a very quick overview of the system. I can now open it up for questions. I can't hear a thing.
Does anyone have any questions? I've just I hit my space bar it went ahead. There we go. Feel free to unmute yourself. If not, we can keep going.
So with the Greg here, with the objectives, do they have measures applied to them?
Well, yes, because you can't have an objective, and how are you going to demonstrate that you're actually achieving those objectives that you measure?
Yeah, and when are they reported back on?
Oh, those objectives, that's up to you. You're doing it currently at your management review. Some companies do it quarterly, some do it every 6 months, some do it whenever a small business would probably measure those every 12 months, their objectives they've set. And they're measured at the audit. Every audit they'd be looked at, and how are your objectives being achieved? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I'm aware of that.
Dennis, Tony, did you unmute yourselves?
Yes, I think so. Can you hear us?
I can,
Oh,
yes.
God, what a good-looking fella.
Who, me or Dennis?
Both.
Oh, that's good.
What can I answer?
You got one? Don't know.
We're just reading it all.
Yeah, we're just trying to take it all into context. Obviously, from June going forward, we will be looking at converting over to this new code. So are you saying when you audit us after that date, it's like our first audit, and you will take it into context of where we comply and where we don't comply?
Depending on the seriousness of the non-compliance, some of those we can work it through, as we say, by issuing a improvement request. Some might be a non-conformance, and until you clear that, we can't recertify you. You know, it's a normal standard. Looking at the Code 10, there are two areas which we'll cover later on in the next session that talks about the context of the organisation, is what we understand, and the risk base. A lot of companies haven't got anything that demonstrates how they've measured all their risks. You know, I look at the risks and, you know, doing your SWOTs and your pest analysis and things of that nature to be able to identify what are your opportunities, what are your risks, you know, and so on, and trying to say this is how we're going to manage those risks. They're mainly the two key elements: is the context of the organisation and and the risks, and how you're going to identify the risk. I mean, there are some other elements which we'll cover as we go through down the track. But the code is pretty simple to read, and there's some good examples in it to be able to then say, I've got a gap there, I need to address that.
Happy with that, guys?
Yeah.
Yeah. Lindsay, you unmuted yourself. Have you got something you wanted to add?
No, not unless Ben or Stu want to ask something.
No. Pretty wrong.
No? All
No.
good? Beautiful.
That was easy.
Yeah, it was.
Got one.
Oh, hang on. We've got another one.
With the previous code, it looked like it was 80% of the way towards some of the ISO certification standards. And with the Code 10, it looks like it meets all three of those standards. Is that correct?
It's designed to meet all three of those standards, yeah.
Yep.
Not fully. It takes the main elements of that statement. If you read most of the CCF code, it is not 100% ISO. It takes the the major components, about 80% of ISO.
Yep.
75 to 80% of the ISO that are relevant to our industry into the CCF code. Yeah.
So is that in relevance to the ISO 45001?
Well, this one's showing the only 45,001. That's unfortunate. That table doesn't show the reference to that, which was something we'll have to have a look at and sort that out, because it's talking about 4801, which is becoming redundant.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
So it's 1800.
Yeah. Two of those have gone out the window, 18,001 and 4801. 45,001 is a simpler one and generally follows the same type of formatting. Yeah.
But it is a higher degree of auditing and a higher degree of...
I wouldn't say that, because if you look at the checklist, there's a fair bit of safety requirements. As I go through that code, you'll see that there is a hell of a lot of requirements, and I reckon it's pretty close to 45,001. As long as you get your risk-based...
We work in that area quite extensively, and the biggest downfall for companies is the fact that they don't get the worker participation.
Consultation, yeah, communication.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, there. See, if you look at that customer, where is it? Responsibilities. I'm trying to think. It under clause 5.4, where it talks about communication and consultation. That's where they need to emphasise that and show how they carry that out, not only internally, but also externally.
Just because we do ISO 45001 auditing, it's the biggest downfall for companies.
Yes.
It's very tough for people to get over it. So yes, using your toolbox meetings, using your pre-starts is all evidence, but what the ISO want to see is their involvement in some of the management decisions at a site.
Yes, and that's why you notice the key element right at the beginning about, leadership.
Yep.
And we talked about how important it is that the leadership's got to be in there all the way through. You've got to be able to demonstrate that you're serious about whatever you've got in place. Unfortunately, we don't do it as well as others, but it's getting better. But if you're ISO, then that's a requirement. Yeah.
Okay, so ready to commence part 2?
Or any other questions about it?
Beautiful. All right.
Gee, that was easy.
Over to you again, Ted.
Oh, I don't even have
Come
to.
on. We need to throw Ted some curly questions. Come on. Keep him on his toes.
At my age. Right. Well, let's have a look at the next section. And as I mentioned to you, this is the general breakup of the code. And you can see the company structure and systems is a fair bit. Most of that you should have in place. Management systems and process, business scope. Business scope, we might have to have a look. I think most companies define that pretty well. Leadership, there's the thing that was mentioned about it's got to be led from the top down. It can't be led from the bottom up. Roles and responsibilities, and a little bit more emphasis on customer and community focus. We always look at the customer, but what about the community generally where we operate in that area? Then you've got your planning, you've got your 6 stages in your planning, and then all the business support, information management, which we call document data control, record management. Then your training comes into the competency and awareness and how you manage incidents. And then the appendices in there give you all of that sort of stuff. Plus, you can see there's 6 areas. I think that's done pretty well. It shows you all the various areas that we talked about. So if you go to the first one, when you look at management systems and its processes, you've got to have, see, it says the organisation must, it doesn't say should, it said must document a management system and in it be able to demonstrate a well-planned, process-driven, risk-based approach to business in general, and in particular in the application of the SEQ management principles. It is particularly important that the organisation can demonstrate the level of type of process control adopted for each of the code elements below are in accordance with the organisation and or job risk profile. So this is where where it's important that you can define your management system. You can tell us it's how you've gone about determining all your risk in your business. And you can see some of the examples that are there, examples of that sort of evidence that we as auditors would be looking at. You know, a documented management system clearly identifying the process that mitigates those risks, whether it's safety, environmental or quality, and maximises opportunities together with their sequence interaction. So you can see that that's an important base. And this is where I was talking about a lot of companies will do the SWOTs, the tests, and then they'll do what they call a risk chart, which has it for the company, and then that's transferred onto a project as you do a project. The organisation business plan continuing the organisation measurable objectives and targets for businesses, and provisions to ensure that the plan is reviewed periodically. I mean, it's really talking about making sure that they're all interacted. You've looked at your business operations, and you've got processes to be able to manage those processes, those risks that you identified in that process. And it says at project level, a risk register addresses all key risks and opportunities within the organisation. I always look at that as saying, you have one for your company, you identify all your risks for your company, and then you use that as a basis to then say, what is applicable to me on the project? So then it'll be project-based, which will have additional or other areas that need to be added to that particular project. Right, next. This is the one that wasn't too well required in the previous code, although most people did have a reasonable definition of their scope. You can see that business scope is an important component. The organisation must establish and clearly specify the scope of its business. The scope must detail the full range of service products it provides that are managed through the application of their management system. So it's got to be, you can't have, you're doing design and development out there, but you're not actually in your system certification. So you've got to make sure that the scope is pretty clear. We understand what you do, and you've got processes in place to be able to demonstrate that that's being managed. Next. Now, one of the key elements, leadership. We always talk about leadership. The leaders within the organisation must demonstrate their commitment. Yeah, it's very hard. I've seen a lot of companies where they just say, the leader says, well, you make it happen. I'm not interested in that. It's how do I just get through this process? To me, the system's not worth it, what it's predicated on, because they have to be committed. They've got to see that as a proactive way of making sure that they're committed and proactive, awareness and involvement in the continual development. They have to lead the charge and make sure that the management system continually improves. So you can see some examples where the leader can demonstrate that. And when I mean leaders, because most organisations have a core of senior management. Unless you're a very small company, then you are the leader. Leaders are aware and active during the management system principles, objectives, you see that, and targets. So each one's you've got some objectives and some targets you've got to achieve, as well as ensuring they align with others, all of business plans. I mean, most businesses have some sort of a 5-year business plan, which they then just keep updating. The leaders are actively involved in periodic review and achievement of the system. You don't have to be there every day, but you certainly need to review at regular intervals, and that has to be demonstrated how you do it to make sure it's being effective. Yeah, your objectives and targets are being met. Make sure you provide the resources you need to achieve that. It just doesn't happen. People that think that a quality management system, it just happens, it doesn't. There is a commitment, there is a financial price to it. Therefore, you must make sure that you resource it accordingly. Leaders demonstrating their active involvement and support of the management system. You know, I mean, you're walking the talk, you know, you're going out on site, you're doing your own site checks. Under ISO, I would expect the senior management to be able to have some sort of evidence when they go out on site that they do a little quick check to demonstrate that they're serious about the commitment. What they've put in place as a group. And you can see there, inductions, management reviews, and so on. Next, thanks. Roles and responsibilities and authority, that hasn't really changed. What you had before, it's you know, there's got to be a structure, some sort of organisational structure, who's performing what, so that everybody knows where they fit into it. It's got to be clearly defined. I don't think that area has changed too much from the previous one. You can see there, there's some legislative changes, particularly in the tightening up of the safety environmental matters, but generally most companies that are using this would have that pretty well under control. And you just need to regularly review that to make sure that it's up to date. And there's some examples. You can have an org chart. It's nice to have an org chart because people like to see where they fit into the pecking order and how the company's structured. Set of position descriptions, very important to know what is it my duties, what am I supposed to do, who am I responsible to, and so on. So you can see there, sign off, key SEQ verification tools, SWIMS, and so on. So roles, responsibilities, authorities are important. Next one, thanks. The old customer and community focus. I think under the previous one, it was under clause 1.4, we talked about client satisfaction. That's an important, I always keep saying to company, if you don't look after your customers or your clients, that goes what I call even interested parties, your subcontract suppliers, then you're going to be really finding it tough. So you can see the organisation must demonstrate that they are proactively seeking feedback from their customers on their performance. I mean, that's pretty good. And I think it's good when you see positive and negative, because we can always improve in meeting their requirements, and that they are also focused on engaging positively with the community affected by their operations. Whether you like it or not, you're going to have an impact on the general community, and they would like to know how you're going to look after their interests. So I think that's an important part. And you can see there, the organisation must ensure that results from customer and community feedback comments are appropriately conveyed to leaders within the organisation and key stakeholders. And they must be supported with objective evidence. There are some examples there of what sort of objective evidence. You might have emails from clients, you might have a form that you get asked the clients to fill out, you might have other means of measuring that, but you've got to have something that does measure it, instead of saying, well, I mean, one of the obvious one is get the client to come back. That's great. But if I said to you, show me the evidence of how many times they come back to you, then you might be okay in that side. But generally, you have something that you can demonstrate as evidence. Next one, thanks. So that finished up that first part. We talked about that part, and this is your key element now, your operations, which is where hopefully you start to generate the money by actually planning and carrying on with the operation. So the first part is planning, and you can see the requirements. There are under that code, well, let me just get my plan. There are 9 dot points. I'm not going to go through all those 9 dot points, but generally I look at this as having an integrated project management plan, some sort of process. And I always get the comment, I don't need a 40-page project management plan to do this job, which is going to take me 2 days or 3 days. No, you can have a 1 or 2 page, but you've got to cover all those elements, even if it's a one-liner. So you've got to demonstrate that you can go to that. And you can see there, the organisation must demonstrate that operations are planned in such a manner to assess achievement of required outcomes within agreed times. Cost, SEQ risk parameters, and you can see there, this involves having a defined planning process for each project job that is enacted prior to commencement, and it identifies at a minimum. And there's your following. I mean, you think about the guys on site, the guy that's in charge, and generally it's the site supervisor who may be a hands-on person, maybe a full-time just doing that. They need to know all those elements. And then the planning phase is the important part where you get all that together through your contract client requirements. Make sure that's clearly, so that's your scope of works. Or any risks you've identified. What sort of resources you need. I mean, all of that sort of stuff is important. Who's doing what? See that key responsibilities? Next, thanks. Yep. Standards, specification for the works, important. What am I working towards? What work methods and operational system processes you've got in place? What sort of skills do I need to do the job? There's your SEQ risk mitigation measures to be deployed. That's what I'm saying. For that project, where's your risk register? Services provided by others and plans for managing their SEQ compliance. One of the key areas of concern I find with most organisations, the way they view their subbies and suppliers. They're like employees. They shouldn't be treated as something foreign, because your performance is measured across the whole board. How your guys do their work, how your subcontractors perform, and your suppliers perform. So they need to be taken in board just the same as anybody else. So when you're doing that area, make sure that you've looked at that area, how you're going to mitigate those risks and manage it. Verifying compliance of specified requirements. Yes, clients' reports, handovers, your test results and all that other stuff, ITP plans, as-built. Sometimes you might have to do camera verification if you've got to, provide on subdivisions certain activities, as-built drawings and so on. Operating manuals. Where changes to plan arrangements occur, and they will occur, there will be variations. How you're going to manage that, and you can see that. That's another risk. And one of your risk registers should identify that when things change on site, how are we going to manage that? Next one, thanks. 5.2, there's 6 dot points there. Again, you've got to demonstrate. You see, it must. It doesn't give you any leeway. It says the organisation must demonstrate that their operations are conducted in accordance with the planned management and that controls are being implemented to satisfy, mitigate SEQ risks. Areas requiring operational control, for instance, you've got there defined process and objective evidence of implementation will be similar to those identified at the planning stage. Then they talk about the include areas. So you've got to be able to demonstrate that you're actually following what you've documented down. I've seen some of these project management plans, and then you say, well, show me the evidence of that. Oh, we don't do that. Well, then you're really non-compliant because you've said you will do that. One of the biggest worries I find is the site personnel tell me they don't have time to do pre-start daily meetings, toolbox meetings, or some of those other, paperwork that they see are not very important. Yet to me, they're critical to demonstrate the commitment and control. So everybody, that consultation communication, everybody's up to speed with everything that needs to be done. So to me, the control part is very important. So you've got the 6 elements there. The next one, thanks. You can see some others. Make sure the standard specs for the work's being performed. Make sure they've got a copy. Oh, they don't need it, Alan. So of course they do. What work methods and operations? Risk mitigations. Services provided by, we talked about how did we go backwards? Keep going next. 5.2. No, you're all over. Yeah, you just had it there. So you keep going down now. Next one. Now. Right. There's the other 3 elements. Design or design management activities as applicable. Out of the correct and I audit, I would say probably 80% don't do design. I'm noticing a lot more are starting to think about design and development. So, but it's not a big area. But again, you must have a process to be able to demonstrate that you've got control of that, inputs and outputs. Where operational risks exist relating to external provided processes, this is where your subby suppliers. And anytime client supplied products, sometimes you've got to manage that. So if it's not up to scratch, make sure that you let the client know. And at completion and handover aspects, including evidence that all work completed as requested. I mean, there's all your records you've got to be able to demonstrate. So if you're going to have to provide that, then make sure that it's in a format that everybody can understand and fill out those forms that are required to provide evidence. Thanks. Now 5.3. Monitoring and maintenance. Again, you see, the organisation must demonstrate that their operations are being monitored and maintained, ensure compliance and key areas of process and performance requirements. It's part of your SEQ risk mitigation measures, you know. That makes sure that you include the provisions of ongoing inspection, calibration and maintenance of plant and equipment. Today, that's an important area, because if you're a quality assured company, not a quality control company, then you've got to demonstrate that you're meeting all those requirements. So the calibrations, the ongoing inspection records that you keep, your daily diary records, you know, all of that sort of stuff is so critical. The organisation must develop, monitor and maintenance regime for each project and job based on risk, complexity of work and any specific legislative client requirements. So that's pretty straightforward there. The performing monitoring and maintenance activities must be appropriate, experienced and deemed competent by the organisation to conduct these duties. Well, you've got to make sure that in your scope of works you have the appropriate skills, or you've outsourced some of those skills that you haven't got, and can demonstrate that they're all in place to meet those requirements. Thanks. Now, somebody mentioned about, one area that we don't do very well on site is the consultation part and communication with our workforce. It's getting better, but it's still got a long way to go. I agree with that comment. That's one of the hardest things to. I can recall being on one site where the gentleman in charge there said to me, "Look, we have a general meeting in the morning, we have a chat about what we're going to do, and then we go off to do the job." And I say, "Show me the evidence." He says, "Well, I don't need to. I told them what to do, and they just went and did it." And I said, "I've got no evidence that you actually did it. There's no evidence that those guys actually attended. You need to have something to verify that. And if it takes you 5 minutes to hold that meeting, it will take you another 30 seconds to document that meeting, because if you have a standard set up pro forma, it doesn't take very long." So I think it's important that we get everybody to confirm and sign on that part. So that communication, consultation is so important. You can see there regular, where are we? Compliance is being maintained to legislative requirements for proactive communication establishment. You've got a requirement under the Work Health and Safety Act in South Australia to make sure that you consult, communicate with your employees and anybody that's working on your site, because you are responsible for their performance. The other one is regular client communication. How do you go about that? Do you have weekly site meetings, fortnightly site meetings? Do you communicate using electronic means, or what is it? You know, just make sure that it meets the requirements and it's efficient, as you can see. And there's some examples. I'm not going to go through those, but you can read those depending on the project requirements. Now, one of the new elements which they've put in there, although you've always had to have some, but it was rather quite some sort of process, is the emergency preparedness. They've made that a specific item. And I think it's an important key element of how we manage that. And you can see there again, the organisation must demonstrate that they have appropriate planned for emergency situations during operations, giving full consideration to the individual risks for each particular job. They include establishment of emergency contacts. I think most companies do that pretty well. They have, you know, all the emergency contacts listed out on the wall somewhere where it's physically, hopefully it's not hidden in a folder. It's got to be somewhere where you can actually see it and action very quickly. Evacuation response plan. And it shouldn't be too difficult to have a drawing of the job, a layout which says, well, here is my emergency assembly area. This is, you know, exits and all that sort of stuff marked on that particular drawing. The provision of associated training and equipment. Right, what have we got in place in relation to first aiders, fire wardens, fire extinguishers, first aid gear, all of that sort of stuff. It needs to be something that's easily accessible and really visually you can see it straight away when you come onto a particular site during your inductions. So you can see environmental impact and communication, both internal and external, in the development and implementation of these provisions. So part of your project planning is that emergency preparedness. For head office, I would expect to see some sort of formal drills now conducted using some sort of appropriate checklists at regular intervals. At least every 12 months, some do it more regularly depending on the risk. On project sites, that may be difficult at times, so you need to make sure you address it at your, what I would say, at your initial induction, plus at regular toolbox meetings that you hold, that item is refreshed at regular intervals. Thanks, Melissa. 5.6 improvement management. You can see there, you've got to demonstrate that where they have issues identified both internally and externally that may result in a deviation from the specified requirements. In other words, if you're going to produce a product which is not to the requirements of the specialist or client requirements, then how are you going to manage it? What impact is it going to have, either positive or negative? What you're doing generally is raising what I would call an NCR or an improvement request to try and work through how you're going to manage it. So you've got to show some evidence that you've actually got a process in place to identify an area that's gone off the rails, how you're going to fix it, and what the end result is. So you can see there some of the examples of evidence that you might have is your business and project job level issues, non-conformance registers, improvement forms and registers, defects lists, post-project reviews and reuse of positive outcomes, suggestion and feedback schemes, positive project reviews. So there's a number of, that's what they call continual improvement of your business. 6.1, pretty well what you used to have under, I think it was clause document data control. So that'd be 6.1, 6.2 in the old system, which was record management too. So you can see in here it says you've got to demonstrate, you must demonstrate that vital information within the business, both at company level and at operational level, which means there's out on projects, is appropriately captured, controlled, maintained, retained and secured. This includes hard copy, electronic documents and data. A lot more companies I noticed are using electronic information type control, which I think is fantastic because out on site paper, hard paper is a very difficult thing to keep clean and accessible at times. So there's some of the areas that you can go about. I'm not going to talk about that too much because it's something that you guys currently would have in place, how you go about your document data control, make sure the document, you can identify it, you know what version it is, where it's held, what its purpose is and all that sort of stuff. And then record retention of and including your archiving and the periods that you're going to maintain that record. There's some statutory requirements that you've got to keep. There may be something under the project requirements. Some of the stuff maybe have to be kept for 30 or 40 years, so you need to establish that. So there's a certain duty of care in making sure that you retain documented evidence. Next one, thanks.
That is the next one, Ted.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I'm just catching your breath. Just bear me in mind. This talking I'm not used to. Now, competency awareness, again, not much difference there, guys. It's similar to what you had before. You've got to demonstrate that that appropriate assessment and training provisions exist. That you guys are skilled to the level that's required. If not, you've got a plan in place to be able to cover those deficiencies. You can see these include having process in place to appropriately manage the competency of those providing service to the organisation or on their behalf. Your subbies have got to do the same thing. They've got to have the same sort of level of competencies. There's a lot more VOCs coming out. It's really trying to demonstrate that you, at regular intervals, you are checking that your guys have got the appropriate skills. In some jobs, they do it project by project. In others, they might do it every year or every 2 years, depending on what sort of skills that you need to check from our employees. So you can see the competency training needs for each role. Under 4.4, we talked about that there, about the org chart and all that sort of stuff. Leadership within the organisation, you've got to define it. You've got to demonstrate that staff employees have been made aware and understand their organisation management system. That's one area, guys, I've found is not well done. We've got systems that our guys don't understand or are not aware of it. It's important that the areas that they're involved in, that they are fully aware of the systems in place. Whether you have to do it by hard copies or electronic copies on site using an iPad or a tablet or some sort, it's important that they have access to that. It's like their operating manual. I always keep saying, if I went and talked to one of the operators, I'd say to him, tell me what's in the operating manual. And they wouldn't be able to tell me in detail, but they'll say to me, if I'm not sure of something, I will go and look in the operating manual and just check that I'm doing the right thing. So that's why it's important that they have access to the management system that applies to them. It's critical to be available on site or in anywhere that they are operating, that management system can be accessed. So you can see that includes the duty, care, responsibilities and other industry legislative requirements. Technically, they're supposed to have available their Act and regs and all that sort of stuff on site in some form or other. You can see there, it says the awareness must extend to the operational environment where awareness of specific project, job risks and other essential requirements is paramount. That's why that initial induction can cover a lot of areas and just highlight to people where they can access information. So 6.2, I think most companies have got systems in place, but just making sure that it trickles down to the people out in the field is important. Incident management, you can see there again, you've got to demonstrate that where safety and environmental incidents occur, they are managed in accordance with a defined process. So you've got to have, they don't call it procedure, you've got to have a process of how you go about it. So when there's an incident, what's the steps that I need to take in relation to, reports, actions to be taken, whether it's both internally, externally, is it reportable to the regulators, or is it just an internal matter that I've got to bring my line manager up and try and follow through the investigations and corrective actions that down the track we'll have to do. So it's that corrective preventative action that's so important. You're not going to stop errors occurring. What you're hoping to do is to minimise them, and we learn by people, encouraging people on your sites to record those. Most people are very reticent because they feel it's a reflection on their performance. It shouldn't be. We're human. We're going to cock up. So what we need to do is let's have a look at it and see what we can do to minimise that occurring again. So that incident management is sort of split out. You can actually integrate that with your NCRs. You can have your normal quality, safety, environmental incidents register as one, but you've got to have a process of how you identify your safety, environmental incidents and the way you do the investigations throughout that. So train and equip personnel is important, that they understand how to go about that. Thanks, Melissa. That's your code. That's the main areas that you need to comply with. And if you can comply with that, that's fantastic, and it's away you go. And I would encourage any company that I think they're just about there is to go for getting audited to issue 10 as soon as you can, because that, as I said, the sunset will come at the end of February, where that won't be recognised anymore. What I might do is I might change the sequence a bit just to give me a break. Just hold it on there. I might just answer questions currently or any feedback that somebody else wants to give me in relation to the code itself at this stage.
Sure. Has anyone got any questions so far? Just unmute yourself and ask away. I've got one in the chat box.
Yep.
How applicable is it to traffic management? It seems very construction orientated.
Well, there is a section in there where if you look at that checklist, it talks about traffic management
So that's
is a civil operation. Every job just about requires some sort of traffic management to be undertaken. So the processes are still the same. The only thing is that the extent, the scope of their work will be reduced. So when you look at all the other real elements, it'll still apply because you still got to have all the other about the code requirements. Let me just pull out the where are we? Where's my code here? They've still got to have a company structure and they've got to have systems in place as it applies to their business.
Mm-hmm.
Operations, how do they go about planning their traffic management? How do they then do the work on site? You know, what's their emergency preparedness and all that stuff as it applies. So you've got to look at as it applies to what you do in the work area. I mean, if you're a concreter, there are certain areas that you'll only be doing, but when it comes to the various elements, you've still got to be competent in what you're doing. You've still got to have, if there's an accident, you've still got to have some way of reporting it. You've still got to plan your job. What's my emergency process? So, you know, all those would they're still in the civil construction industry. It's just that they're doing specific topics. Does that answer it?
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
Yeah, that's fine. I just wanted to know if it was sort of relevant to specific parts of the construction side of it.
I can't hear you there. Can you just speak up a bit?
I just wanted to know if it was relevant to specific parts of the construction industry, you know, rather than just construction as a whole. That's all. Well,
any ISO, even an ISO standard, any standard is generic. And then you answer it as it applies to your business. So if you're traffic management, then you would develop your processes around your traffic management requirements. So when you talk about plant equipment, you might only have arrow boards and trucks and that sort of stuff, which is where the extent of your plant equipment control is, isn't it? Pre-start daily checks that you might have, where you might have weekly or daily, depending on your structure. How you plan your jobs is still going to be the same thing. So we can't be too specific and narrow. You've got to keep it broad.
No, that's good. I appreciate the feedback.
So, yeah, I'd be just looking at that element and just saying, what is it that I need to cover to meet the requirements as it applies to my scope of works?
And what about the site-specific stuff then?
Well, when you look at the site-specific stuff, you'll be operating. Yeah, I'm going to go through that in a minute, and then we'll address that and just say how it. I mean, you look at the site-specific requirements, project planning. Somebody's got to show me on site that there's a plan for me to do the job. Meeting specified requirements. What are the requirements that I've got to meet? What safety management do I have to have as a traffic controller? What environmental management? I don't want to spill all over the place or this or that. Communication consultation, how do I go about that as it applies to me? Monitoring and inspection, is there any things that you need to monitor and inspect? Of course you do. You've got to inspect your traffic management at regular intervals. You've got to monitor it, don't you? Competencies, guys need to have tickets, you know, traffic management, white card, whatever else. They might have to have a site induction specific online.
Yep.
Any issue management, yes, you know, there's some reporting process and incident and emergency preparedness. You might have yours as a company, but when they go and work for a host client, they might have to operate under their system. So long as they record that, they're operating under Fulton Hogan or whoever, because most of the times you'll be a subcontractor to a principal contractor.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for that.
Any others?
Going once?
I must be so good, or they're falling asleep.
No, we'll go with the
Checklist?
checklist. You are
Okay.
that good too, Ted. You know, give yourself
Yeah,
some credit.
while we got them bluffed, we can get the checklist going. So if you look at the set out, as you can see when we said right at the beginning, looks like this. It's a requirement, as it says there, site assessment checklist. You've got the various components there, you know, a couple of photographs that we'll pick strategically just to make sure that, you know, it gives a good overview of what the project is. And then you've got the sheet there which says findings. So based on what I'm going to go through in the next few sheets, they'll be the summary findings. You know, yes, does it comply, or no, it doesn't, or it does comply, but I made an observation, you know, a bit tardy in your paperwork or something. And there's the 9 elements, and then there'll be a summary of those findings, you know, and there may be some, you know, overall the site implementation finding was acceptable or unacceptable. So well, hopefully it'll be always acceptable, wouldn't it, guys? So that's a summary sheet. And if you look at the first requirement that we as auditors have to look at, I'm not sure you can read that. Or maybe trouble. You having trouble reading that? Sort of. First one, criteria is project planning, and it talks about, is there a project plan in place that assures implementation of key management system? You've got to be able to demonstrate, and it's the hardest thing I find, that people don't understand. A project management plan doesn't have to be 30 pages or 50 pages. It may, if it's a large project, because of all the other criteria, but it could be a couple of pages. You know, so it depends on the extent of your work and the controls you've got in place. So you can see there, you need a project management plan. What applicable? You can see there, I'm just reading through the identification of project works as associated detailed timeframes. Guys need to know when they start, when they finish. What are the other requirements that I have to do? Is there any hold points, you know, inspection points, all that sort of stuff. So that's in your project planning. And in the case of the traffic management, the project planning might be just these diary which shows who the client is, location, times he's got to be there, and what the extent of the work is that they've got to do. All right? Unless there's some other, there might be some depot permits that you've got to get and things like that. So, and you can see there the management system and all clients, including identification of underground services. It's all part of the planning process. The other things that would meeting specific requirements. And in that side, you can see our client specified requirements for the work readily available on site. Do the guys know what is the client's requirements? Readily available on site and updated as required. State those cited. So I'd have to cite what did I see? Understand by those responsible for completion of the works. Understood. So in other words, the people doing the job, do they understand what are the client requirements? A key part of the work verification methodology being verified progressively as completed, as built. So we've got an ITP plan. You know, for larger jobs, you'll have an ITP plan. For smaller jobs, it might be, I've just got to do a test, 2 tests on this particular trench that I'm doing, or the client's got to come and visually witness something. So somewhere in that plan, it's got to be stated, so nobody is just guessing. Under safety management, this is what I would say a fairly large area. Are the risks associated with the worker safety on the site being appropriately managed? You know, the guys are not wearing their PPEs properly. Guys under excavator without hard hats, and what are they doing underneath there for a start? I would be asking. All those sort of things. You know, have we looked at the risks and we've got appropriate things in place? Key work activities and items of plan. What are we using on site? Frequent reviews of site-specific risks. This is where that daily pre-start meeting is a good one to identify anything. What are we doing today? You know, what risks are associated? What swims are we operating on today? Evidence that all risks and associated control measures are communicated to site workers as and when required. This includes subcontract visitors to site. That part about subcontractors visited to site is poorly done. That can improve, I think. If they're there at the start of the day, then they should be part of your pre-start meeting. If they're not, then you should have a record somewhere which says what you discussed in the morning. So they come in and sign in, and then they read what you've got. Then they may add anything that they are using which needs to be addressed. So it's important that they're communicated what's required. A visitor is the same thing. A visitor is no different to anybody else. They need to be told what to do and what are they allowed to do on site and what happens if something goes off the rails. Where are we? It's associated with appropriate risk mitigation, such as traffic. Well, your traffic management's back in place. Look at that, traffic management and permits in place as appropriate. They're all safety. They're the sort of safety issues that we'd be looking at. Similar type things under environmental. You know, what's the aspects and impacts that are going to environmentally that are going to be evident on this job? What do I need to manage? You know, is it soil erosion? Is it dust? Is it noise? Spillage? You know, that sort of stuff. So as it says, evidence that environmental impacts and control measures are communicated to site workers again. That's so important in your induction that they're all fully up to speed and aware of all of that sort of stuff. Communication and consultation, as somebody previously mentioned, we can certainly improve on that. I think that goes with ISO companies, anybody. That seems to be an area that is always for improvement. As it says, does the existing exit on site of appropriate worker communication consultation exist on site? Include awareness of applicable specific requirements. Is it available on site? If you've got safety rules, where are they? I've gone on site, yeah, we've got safety rules. Why aren't they pinned on the wall so somebody can actually see it? Because you can tell me that, I can walk out the door and I'll forget it. You've got to make sure it's something that I can readily access and understand what your requirements are. And you can see there. A mechanism for regular information sharing, including changes that occur in the site conditions or processes. When your swims change, they're regularly reviewed. Or when you're doing an activity which is new, you should really consult with the group, make sure all bases are covered. They're the people that are going to do the job. You make sure that they're happy with what you're proposing that's going to be put in place, you know, whether it's an SOP, swims, whatever. Define and communicate issues reporting and escalate process, clear understanding of authority and reporting requirements. They need to understand if I have an accident or an incident, who do I talk to? What do I report? You know, what's the process in place? That communication, consultation, you know, if you have a CCF give you an alert on something, whatever it is, you know, we just heard that a particular brand or whatever it is has these issues. The first thing I would be doing is reading it, understanding it, and then getting it out as quick as I can to those people that are using that so they're aware of it. So they you know, it's like bulletins that come out. It's so important. It helps your consultation, communication, and awareness that they need to have. And you can see there on the next page, I think I'm on the next page, item, however you've got this, monitoring and inspection. I can't see that, so that's too small for me.
It's all right, it's down the bottom. I can just see it.
You can just see it.
Apologies for this. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's always hard on the Now, when it talks about monitoring inspection, what we'll be looking at on site is, you can see it, does evidence exist on site of appropriate monitoring and inspection, including ongoing inspection monitoring of works? You know, how often do we do a safety audit around the site? In fact, I'm amazed at companies that their guys, they do it every day. Before they hit the site, sometimes the supervisor's there before the guys are off, they walk around the site and have a look at it. At the end of the day, they walk around the site and make sure it's secure and safe. And I say to them, where's the evidence you've done that? Oh, well, I do it. It's just standard. Why can't you have a diary which says morning inspection, tick, end of day inspection, tick? You don't have to write any words. Just provide evidence that you've actually did those in relation to those sort of areas I just spoke about. So inspection and monitoring of works, compliance to specified requirements, safety, environmental risk controls in place, frequent plant equipment inspections as required. You know, are the guys doing their pre-starts? Oh yeah, I got a book, and I have a look at books at times, and I find there's a week missing. He hasn't filled it out, or in some cases it was 2 or 3 months. And I keep saying, there's a little spot there that says you should be doing random checks. Oh, that's what he's paid to do. No, you're also paid to have a look, because we're human. We can forget about things. You need to also assist in that process. Safety and environmental risk plan, ongoing monitoring of management systems and project plan compliance. You know, is it working, what we've planned? Do we need to alter it? And then you see that satisfactory monitoring of subbies activities. How are we managing those? Have the people that have come on site have got all the appropriate gear? Is it in date? Have they got a swims, or do they have to go through our swims and we have to get them to sign off on that? You know, we need to make sure that they've got all their tickets in place and that sort of stuff. VOCs are in place as required. So you can see that's part. Then competencies. So what we do is, does evidence exist on site to demonstrate that those performing work, including subbies, are appropriately trained? Show us your ticket. It's amazing how many times I ask that. Oh, I left it home. Right. Or I lost my wallet. Something like that. So what's the backup? These things will happen. They're not unique. What do you reckon might be an option? Yeah, we might have some copies just to back us up, because he's lost his hard copies for the time being. But generally, they need to take responsibility and make sure that's available. Make sure they've attained the basic training that's required. Hold appropriate tickets. Are trained in company work and risk mitigation methods. Have they been trained in the company's operations? Then you've got issue managements. Are there appropriate mechanisms in place to site to capture, report and resolve key issues, including ensuring that those that relate to not meeting specified requirements? So if you do have something that's not to the spec, what's the process? How do we go about it? How do you report it? I ring the project manager or a site manager, and he will then communicate with the client, and then there's a trail. We can find that. But there's got to be a process in place that demonstrates how that's managed. Where issues may have global or company level systems implications, and they are reviewed at a business system level. If you're finding your whatever, your ITPs or your management system on safety is not working, then you need to chuck it upstairs and say, listen, fellas, we need to review the whole lot because it's not working. We're finding too many gaps in certain areas. So that's part of that issue management. All key issues are reviewed to ensure preventative measures are established. How do we measure that? How would you demonstrate that on site to me? You've got to have some sort of evidence. Incident emergency preparedness. You've got to have the appropriate provisions. I'm not going to sort of highlight too much, but just remember, having it in a folder somewhere, hidden away, doesn't satisfy the requirements, because when I have an emergency, I don't want to go and start reading the manual and find out. Have it so it's physically in your face. Have it so that people can access that very clearly and understand it. Have it so that that folder is actually available. I've seen some of these. All of the stuff is there, but the shed's locked because the site manager's off-site, or the site engineer, or whoever it is, and they can't access it. So that's not accessible, guys. So make sure that it is. And all your firefighting equipment, first aid, and all that sort of stuff is adequate for the risks involved in that particular job. on that side. I mean, surveyors may need to have some special thing because they go into tall grasses, they got snakes and all that sort of stuff. So there are additional provisions, and likewise for people that work in those sort of areas. You know, SDS is in place, material spill kits, all that sort of stuff. I don't think this list is that difficult. I think it's just highlighting better what one would expect you guys to have on site, and to make sure that everybody understands the way the company operates and what's required of them and what's required of you guys to make sure that you provide the appropriate support for them. You know, the infrastructure, the resources that they need to do their job. I think that's about all I want to. That's about all I want to say. I'm now open for general questions, comments, disagreements, whatever.
Feel free to unmute yourselves and ask questions if you've got any.
Yeah, Ted, it's Joe here. Just you mentioned at the beginning that the version 10 is focused more on site performance. Do you anticipate that the site supervisors will have to do more paperwork?
I don't believe that. I think the companies are at fault because they make the paperwork too difficult. I think a lot of the times, and Joe, I always say to Joe that, look, put a box and say, I've done, all I want to say is evidence that you've done the site inspection, because somewhere in some sort of process you'll say in their job style, they'll do a daily walk around the site, make sure this is, so that's already in their training. What I want to see is evidence that they're actually doing. So to tick a box is not going to be that difficult or time consuming. That's the excuse that's used, but that's all crap in my words. Does that make sense? Seriously, have a look at your paperwork.
Yeah.
Try and simplify it. Don't look at it from your point of view of how I see it, because we will see it differently. Have a look at it, the guy on site. How can he action that without too much effort, and he can understand it? You know, we understand half the time he's out there getting his hands dirty and doing all sorts of things. What can I do to assist him? Try and make that paperwork proactive instead of him saying it's a load of codswallop that I can't handle.
Ted.
Yeah.
It's Chris Silver.
Christopher.
How you going? With this checklist with the photographs, are they mandatory?
Yep.
Because how do we get on? We work on some sensitive sites.
Okay.
Photographs aren't allowed. We work on sites with flammable where cameras aren't allowed.
Yeah, that's right.
And I can't, if I don't have a site for you to audit, how can you take where you can take photographs?
I'll get a drone up there, I'll fix it. No, the way I would overcome that is, and I put that in my report, I'd take a shot outside the place.
But even so, if our client is the site sensitive, they don't want photographs anyone taking. We work on some environmental sites where they don't want anyone knowing what's going on. They don't want any photographs taken. If I've employed you to do my audit, drive past
there, Chris, anybody can drive past their premises and take a photograph.
Yeah, but if you're doing an audit on my behalf,
yes,
and then you're in breach of my contract with my client if it says no photographs will be taken of the site, and I have an agreement with them, because you're still working on my behalf. You're not a Joe Blow walking past. You're not a policeman on his job taking a photograph of a criminal. So that's what I'm just saying.
So what I would do then is I would ask the client that I will not take a photograph of the job site as such. Is it okay? Because I can take a shot of their office to say this is the.
I'm just asking. That's all, because
no. I'm sure we can overcome that. I'm the Defence Department. I can see the problems there.
Yeah.
You know, we'll have to work out something. You might have to hold up a sign and say, "I'm Chris and I'm over here," or something like that.
Well,
there's got to be ways around it.
We're doing a project at the moment. We've not only got cultural issues, we've got issues with a blue-tongued sleepy lizard. We've had a permanent environmental on site watching that we don't dig a hole or upset a burrow, which is blue tongues in. So, I spent 40 minutes on our project meeting about it. So, anyways, that's all I want to know, Ted.
Well, you're a bit of a sensitive man. That's good, Chris. I like that.
Thanks.
Surely, if it's that easy, guys, you should have no trouble then. There's no other questions?
Just an observation. I guess from partnering with some businesses, they're awesome at creating templates or documents, but there's been limited consultation with their actual team to say, okay, this is what you need to implement. So just for some employers that I've come across, is that they've been really great to try and implement a new form or a new system or something, but then their staff actually don't know that it exists. So it's like when you're exactly what you're talking about with the evidence side of things, you might have these great templates, but then nobody knows where to find it and nobody knows how to fill it out and nobody knows that it exists. So that's just a observation from me, looking at businesses' safety management systems.
Yeah, that's where I find that consultation communication is very poor.
Yeah.
And it's important that everybody in the system understands what their duties are and how they're supposed to be performed, and what is the expectations from me and what is the expectation from the employer to provide. Yeah, I know what you're talking about there, and it is an area of concern. And I think leadership is going to have to improve in the way that's managed. The person involved needs to go all the time, all the way through down to the bottom. Sometimes the guys, the owner of the business doesn't even get out to the site, or rarely gets out to the site. So how would they know what's going on?
You just give them a non-conformance, major.
That goes in one ear out the other.
Well, surely in today's world, and we do this, we convert our documents into mobile. And once you start doing that, it cuts so much time out of filling out the piece of paper.
Yep.
We've only just recently got Rio Tinto to understand that, gee, you can do it underground and it's twice as fast, and the supervisor's already got control. So the way of the future is doing them electronically.
I encourage most companies to do that. I know it's a bit of a cultural shock for some people, but I say if they can use a phone, they'll be able to use a tablet. And it shouldn't be too difficult. Most are willing to try that out. And it saves you. Just imagine copying some of the MSDSs or SDSs. That's a volume on its own. It would take somebody ages to copy them. So put it on a tablet. But make sure it's accessible, it's available. Because the worst thing you can do is not have it available.
It can be done.
Yeah. I'd encourage most companies to go that way.
Well, it's happening at Olympic Dam and it's happening at a lot of the mining sites, so they're getting with it. And I would have thought they were the worst case scenarios. They love paper. But
they love paperwork.
I think we might be catching up to them.
Yeah, I'm finding there's a change in culture in the civil side, that they're using a lot more. I've got a number of companies that are just electronically. They're using, and you can develop, you don't have to go for difficult things. You can slowly develop paperwork type things that are maintained on the laptop or iPad or whatever.
Even dip ties got a little bit more modern.
Oh, you're kidding.
Yeah, I saw an electronic form the other day. I was quite surprised.
Ted, just on that, we've rolled out.
How are you, my friend? How's Port Lincoln?
Good, mate, good. We're just in the process of rolling out, or the last 6 months, we've been using an electronic format called Dash Pivot. Is there in the code, I just noticed there that there was a line about maintaining a physical copy as well, because we're trying to get away from all of the scanning and...
I don't think it said a physical copy. It says access to evidence.
Okay. Yeah, I just thought it said something about physical.
Look, if that did say it, it's wrong, because long as you can, they don't say what format the evidence has to be, but it's got to be something that you can access.
Yep.
And provide evidence that you're doing whatever it is you're supposed to be doing, or have in place. Yeah, no problems on that side.
All right, very good.
So you're ready to rock and roll on that in about a few weeks' time?
I'm leaving that to Catherine.
Good on you.
Anyone else got any other questions they'd like to ask Ted while we've got him?
I'm happy to answer anything. the auditing process, whatever.
I can't see you. I've gone blank.
Yeah, Ted's
Ted.
there.
Ted?
Tony, my boy, how are you?
That's about mine. Just a quick one. You said that we need to be up and running with the new code from by March. Is it March 2000?
No, by the end of February. The other
February.
ones-
So let's say, for example, we're due in, our audit's due in March. Do we need to have an audit prior to that?
Yes.
We do. Okay, that's
Yeah.
fine.
So we'll have to do it in February.
Okay. Right.
Okay.
That's all I need to know. Thank you.
Thanks.
Anyone else?
Yep. Particularly regarding the timeframes with February, are there any concerns with availability of audits? Do we need to potentially be booking ahead 2-3 months in advance?
Good question.
I wouldn't, I don't care who the cab body is, I wouldn't all of a sudden all book in February, because that'll tend to just squash it up. Plus, depending whether they're one of the ones that do it, why would you want to wait till February now? Are you certified currently?
Yeah, we're current and we're good for a little while yet. I'm just making sure that we're not heading towards a period where it's squashed.
To my way of thinking, if you, I'd be looking at January, February if you're as the latest, because at the end of February it starts to drop off. Yeah, I've got a number of clients now that'll come into February because of that. I'm hoping that the ones from about end of June onwards will be doing the version 10 anyhow. So that won't be too much of an issue on that side. I think most of it should be able to be accommodated. But yeah, we were advised that by the end of February, that the other code won't be recognised. Well, it may not be recognised by CCF, but I think some clients might still be quite happy with that until they change over to that. What they're saying is it won't be Jazz Ends recognised yet.
So Ted, it's Dale from Teagles. Kurt has asked me for June, if we still want, how do we go about booking you in for our audit now? Like we're due for May, June?
No, you're due in July, August.
July, August, is it? Okay.
Yeah, you've got a bit of time. Flick me an email. I'll work out a time with you.
Okay, that sounds great.
So you must be new in the company then.
Yeah, I've only just been here for 3 weeks at Nelson.
Oh, you are new. Talk to young...
Kurt waved to you earlier to say hello when he...
Oh, good on him. Yeah, I'll have a look and just flick me an email that you're on board and we'll work it out from there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
You've got a code? Just out of interest, has everybody got the code? They should have the code, which is important.
If you haven't got the code, flick me an email and I'll send you the paperwork that you need to fill out to get a copy of it.
And that's the self-testing, you'll send that out as well.
What Melissa's going to do for you, you can see there a copy of this presentation and a recording of the webinar will be available on their website. So there's a website, you'll go into there and log in as a member and it'll be down there and you can download that.
Yep, so you can download this webinar and a few other bits of information as well, which I'll make available. And I'll email the link as soon as I've got it uploaded, because obviously downloading this webinar is going to take some time, so give me 48 hours.
Oh, come on.
I know, right? I know. Anyone else got any other questions? We haven't made Ted struggle at all. Surely someone's got something difficult for him.
This is a piece of cake.
No, we've got some more. So going back to the photo, so if there's restrictions and concerns regarding photographs of the site, what's the actual objective of the photographs? Is it simply to demonstrate the scope of operations?
My suspicion is that, demonstrate that you've actually been to the site, but to me, I can ask you to send me a photograph and I can put it on there. It's just a process they want to have in place. First thing I thought, photograph, what do you want that for? I think it's just a bit of marketing for the company, isn't it? We put your machine there with your name on it and all that sort of stuff. But that's the only reason I can think of is that they've got evidence that that's the site that you've actually audited on that side. Right. That's all. If there's something that we can't access or have, well, then we need to be aware of it, and we can work around that. Yeah. I'm sure. Anybody else?
Anyone? God. Silence. Ted, you made them all quiet.
This is
so Melissa, well,
yes.
Ted, with your email, where do I get your email from?
I'll email it through to everyone as well with Ted's contact details. So if you, as everyone does, goes and have a good night's sleep and then wake up in the morning and go, I should have asked Ted this, you can by all means fire him off an email.
Fantastic.
He'll answer it for you.
That's good. Thank you.
No worries at all.
Okay, so everybody's quite comfortable, but the important part is get the code, and that's a requirement that you've got that, so you understand that. And the presentation here pretty well covers all of those elements, and you shouldn't have. I believe if you just look at your current system, the one area you will have to do is do your risk analysis. You know, do your SWOT, do your PEST. And then based on that, it'll tell you what the risks are for the company and the opportunities to resolve those. They're your key elements, and make sure your scope is well presented and it covers the extent of work you're doing.
Fantastic. All right. On that note, we'll leave it there. Like I've said, I'll send you all an email with the link to this before everyone else jumps onto it, and I'll send it out to the big wide world as well. Let me know if you've got any questions, and also Ted as well. Thank you so much for taking the time. Looking forward to seeing version 10 of the code implemented across industry, and I hope everyone's surviving our new normal, and we'll see you all soon. Thanks very much for coming, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah. Bye.
Thank you.
See ya.
Thank you.